Game Woven is now proudly part of the One Shot Network. Check out other great podcasts at oneshotpodcast.com.
So we talked about Nairburn, and then the bridge finally made it to Nairburn, and we got to play, not the ground itself,
The Quiet Year.
the Quiet Year. Thank you. World building TTRPG Bible. Everyone must play the Quiet Year, and we finally did it.
Kind of.
We
For real.
for real. Asterisk. We broke the rules a lot.
Just separated it.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the rule books that say you can't divide it up between
True.
multiple different settings due to a magical traveling bridge.
I mean,
Not specifically.
you're
no.
right.
There is something in the rule book for Quiet Year about dogs not playing basketball, which I found unhelpful, but glad it's in there.
Yes.
What was
You gotta be
in
clear
the
about these
Quiet
things.
Year, though, was a specific rule about multiple communities.
Oh,
Do you remember? So this was...
yes.
Yeah.
yes.
So I was looking through it because we were talking about, okay, should we distinguish contempt between the community the bridge arrives at and the actual bridge itself? And we're like, are we going to have to house rule this? And no, the Quiet Year explicitly states that if there is a rupture or if there's like a division in the community, you track those contempts separately.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
glad
like
we
one
did
of-
that then.
Yeah, that's like one of the few caveats in the Quiet Year. Now, we
Mhm.
broke a ton of other Quiet Year rules, but that one we
No.
actually did follow.
So, experiencing the Quiet Year mostly through actual play, it is. I think that is a game that rules as written would simply not work for an audio medium because it is so heavily
Ooh,
invested in the
yes.
map drawing and
Yeah.
the map building.
Yeah.
we haven't
there's not
learned our
supposed to be-
lesson with the map drawing thing yet.
Listen,
Well,
And we never-
you're a
but, like-
world building thing. We got to play map making.
We got to do
games.
map. Yeah, and we always take a screenshot and then never post it anywhere.
That's my
Um,
fault. We could, but honestly, if anyone saw our screenshots, they'd be like, I'm never listening to that podcast.
We're saving you all. Especially because
Yeah.
this arc, I did a lot of the drawing, which is
But there's also like, if you're making a map as you go, is it really gonna look that much better than
gonna
the
be
lesson we
bad.
ended up with?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
No.
that's what you get.
Listeners,
We
I
know
dare
doing it
you
as
to
you
draw
go.
your own version of the map we're describing as we.
Now, I think we've actually done a very good job of translating the physical locations of things. I don't know.
Mhm.
Listeners, if I'm wrong, like yell at me on Blue Sky. But I feel like we do a really good job of being like, this thing is next to this thing, and it's in like this quadrant of the map. So like, if you close your eyes, don't do this when you're driving. But if you close your eyes, you can sort of visualize where everything's
Yeah,
at.
I imagine 80% of our listen time is while someone's driving.
True. Me too.
I will say there's at least 5% of our listening time that is me falling asleep to our own podcast. Game Woven was number 2 on my Spotify Wrapped this year.
I was just about to make that joke. You falling asleep to our podcast, and we're still only number 2. Like,
That's because I fell asleep more often to the other one. That was my number 1.
which one's the other one?
It was a Dragon Age Let's Play podcast. I always forget.
Oh, is that Dylan's?
No,
no, that was
No?
number 5.
Oh.
I think.
that was
It's
a different one.
that isn't Dylan's.
That is a different Dragon Age podcast
But
because
I
that
think
one.
Dorkspawn was still number 5.
Yeah, Darkspawn was number 5, and that one was number 1. That one
Sorry,
is
Dylan.
because that one finished, and so it's done, and I just let it play on loop over and over to fall asleep to sometimes.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Makes sense.
What's interesting about Nairburn's spring arc compared to the other bridge arcs is that it's the most, I think, the most grounded. Like, we really dug into the relationship between the bridge and these people, and a lot of like the nitty gritty, tiny little things. It was very granular. And the other Quiet Year sections were, I think, a little broader and more potentially even allegorical. This is not a criticism, it's just an observation. But Nairburn was definitely like, just like the desert in which it was set, was very much granular.
Yeah. I
Oh,
think and
Nairburn
what's
Let's start with Emily.
Wasn't Nairburn essentially like the first stop of the bridge after it left?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
like they were just trying to figure out what happened and find themselves and figure out where they are. So yeah, it's going to be a little more human scaled, little more introspective, and well, not introspective. We get the introspective later, but just more focused, narrow
In the
focused.
moment?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is funny because those moments are spread out over 12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I think that was
12 years for the first one.
Yeah. Mhm.
Go ahead, Brie.
There's also like there also wasn't anything else going on in Nairburn. Sorry, Brie, go.
Yeah, the bridge arrived. Like, it was a big change for the people on the bridge. Also, it was right in the wake of one of the biggest tragedies Nairburn had ever experienced. So it was a big time of change for them, and that was the longest we within the game spent in one place. So it
Yeah.
was like helping rebuild and also figure out, like, start building our own home.
Yeah.
I think there's something in that though, because it was both of these groups going through a world-changing trauma, and you could see. I think about the Nairburn Quiet Year arc a lot because of all of the conflicts between the people of the bridge and the people of Nairburn, and like how at first they kind of did their best to sort of like take care of each other, and then the cracks started to form relatively early. The conflict started to seep in. And the ending just cemented those disagreements like in place. Now they sort of came out in the wash, but we ended on this giant conflict moment where it was about to explode in everyone's faces, and that's when DeGale was like, "All right, you're going to."
Yeah.
That was because it ended
divisions and the-
with the good.
The divisions and the differences also make sense because a lot of the people in Nairburn, they're used to that as a people who travel a lot and they get lots of visitors versus these people from Zala who have never been far away from home. You've got these two very, very different people in a very confusing situation after tragedy.
Yeah, especially
Well,
with a
and-
lot of the existing power structures attempting to be amenable. Like that was part of the discussion we had is amongst the individuals who were living there, there was that tension. And I think like some of the major disputes was like between laborers. Or like the times when it did spill over, it was between laborers. But if you remember the discussions that we had, hospitality was something that kind of the elite of Nairburn was really invested in. So there's also that like internal class divide of the opinions, because that's like what I'm remembering is that it was actually pretty easy from certain perspectives. Yeah, sure, conflict, but there wasn't a lot of issues with resource management, especially after the canal got finished.
Well, and then of course you look at the emissary program where they took a Nairburner and an Overtonian and sent them off together to go commute, like go talk to the desert kingdoms. Like that did not bubble up from the Vox Populi. That was a program decided upon by the leadership of the two communities. And a thought that I was just having is that we were talking about how different Nairburn and I guess Overtone, but really Zalo, they weren't Overtonians yet, they were Zalans, really are. If we think about what the culture in Nairburn would have been like. Nairburn would have been a place of great change constantly. It's basically a college town because you have all of these incredibly knowledgeable people, and they're going into the city and spreading their knowledge, and people are going to the sanctuary to gain knowledge, and it's just a lot of learning and growing and adapting and coming up with new ideas. Whereas Zalo culturally is very restrictive, like by necessity, or they turn into monsters. It's very pious, and it's very restrained. They have lots and lots and lots of rules because that's how they have to survive in Zalo. And so like these two sets of people culturally could not be more different.
Yeah, they were fully like the nerds and jocks. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
and which ones are the nerds and which ones are the jocks could be different depending on the day, really.
I think also it's interesting because, like, above the table, I remember we had the idea of some people being like Zalo or Overtonian, like people like try and take that band during your prompts, and then other people be Nairburn people during prompts / discussions. And this was the one season we kind of followed that. It didn't stick very long during the session, but like I know, like, you know, I followed it a little bit, but then that completely went away for other ones. But I think it's telling, especially because, like, honestly, this arc was very interesting for me because the way scheduling worked out, I was like not involved in a lot of the like preamble to a lot of arcs, and so it was very interesting for me coming into like Nairburn and after like Oh Captain and Lost City, you know, like all these things, and just like, all right, well, I've got no like attachment to Nairburn, right? Like I don't like emotionally the like I don't have, like, this isn't my baby, so let's shake things up in a way that I don't know, maybe everyone else wasn't really feeling up to, because you've spent all this time with the lovely Megan building this beautiful place, and it's like, well, yeah, that was just interesting to me.
Those people had the biggest divide, whereas jumping forward a bit in Tarsig, yes, there were differences, but the people of Tarsig were like, oh, hey, you're cool, you're down with us overthrowing this system? Sure, yeah, let's... They came from a more similar background. Yes, the story of where they came from was different, but they understood each other in a way that didn't exist between them and Nairburn. And also they had more experience interacting with other people, because if you think about it, when they first arrived in Nairburn, the only people outside of Zalo they had interacted with was the Empire.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a through line where, like, there's and once again, I don't think we planned. This was not this was not baked in. Okay, this just happened organically. But there's a through line where, like, the bridge put DeGale put the bridge where it needed to be when it needed to be there. And if we sort of carry that through, a thought that I have is, okay, here's a question. So Nairburn has this giant cataclysm. They lose all of the executors. They lose all but one fish. They lose a staggering amount of Barakwi, but in exchange, they destroy the inscrutable. But Nairburn is kind of fucked because their main thing that they do is Barakwi and executors.
The college town lost its college.
The college town lost all its professors. Now what?
Yeah.
And so the question in my mind is, okay, what happens to Nairburn if the bridge doesn't show up? Maybe it still exists, but what I feel like what it probably doesn't do is it probably does not try to reach out to the other desert kingdoms to start supporting each other, to start like trading and to start communing again and start talking.
Yeah, well, like
And-
the mirror
They wouldn't have
shrines,
known.
the mirror
Yeah.
shrines wouldn't have been discovered without
Mhm.
them being there. Neither would the warehouse would have never been
Yeah.
uncovered
Yeah,
or
I mean,
blown
just
up.
like, thinking about it, like, the bridge doesn't show up. Like, even if they had reached out to these other kingdoms, like, what do they have to offer if these other discoveries aren't made, and like there isn't like a upswell of people who weren't, like recovering from this disaster to like try and
They were
pull everything together? Like, it'd be so much easier without the bridge there to just go to a different kingdom, right?
That's
Yeah.
my thought too. Is
Well-
the best you get is Nairburn reaches out to the other desert kingdoms and then disbands, and everyone just goes and picks a kingdom.
Yeah.
There's no Nairburn anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah, the bridge arrived at just the right time to push these two communities out of their comfort zones
Hmm.
in a way that made them grow and learn new things. And that,
And that
also
also,
gave Nairburn something else to focus on, so people wouldn't get lost in their grief.
prepares the bridge for what will eventually become their mission, because the next stop is Tarsig, which is ready to receive them.
Yeah, it almost, not quite, almost mirrors the stages of dependency in development, where, because we go from dependent to codependent to, I forget the third one, then independent.
And along the journey, we went to a place where the people at the bridge learned how to rebuild and keep going after a life-shattering event, as well as seeing what happens when you don't always get along. Then a couple stops later, they got a chance to help be the catalyst for the change and help people find their own footing. And then we see what happens when you reach too far. And in the last stop, we got a glimpse of like, this is what our enemy has been doing and will continue to do if we don't stop them. But also a little taste of, there's hope that once they're stopped, once they're gone, there will be life afterwards.
Yeah, and it's like in the first place you see, okay, you can rebuild after a disaster. And then in the second spot, it's you could cause the calamity if you needed to, and sometimes that needs to happen. And in the third place, it's this is what it looks like if you go too far. And then in the fourth place, it's okay, now you understand your mission. This is what's going to happen if you decline it.
So I did figure out the thing I was trying to remember: dependence, codependence, independence, interdependence.
Which is interesting
That actually
because
work, I think, a
yeah,
lot.
that maps on really well. I know we're
Mhm.
not to Lost City yet, but like codependence being this relationship where like Tarsig and Overton were both like kind of using each other in those ways, and then that independence stage being the one where there's literally nobody there.
Yep.
And then finally landing in this collaborative effort of like, I guess, the bridge leaves and we end up with that community that's staying in the Twins Cradle that is made up of a bunch of different people and a bunch of different populations that are going to make a go of it. Interdependence being that fourth stage is really interesting.
Well, there's also another take on the interdependent stage in the Twins Cradle, which is literally the Fae hitch a ride.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
You're right.
True.
Yeah. In a couple ways, they take a couple different routes and then they spread out everywhere. I'm excited to see what we do with those threads.
We gotta make some little goblin dudes with that game, with that game that Megan has.
I'm excited specifically to see what
Yes.
Emily does with Faye, because I didn't know this about Emily
Yes.
until we did this arc. Emily loves the Fae, apparently. I'm very like when it comes to like fantasy, like the classical fantasy creatures. I don't really have ones. I'm like, yes, those are my dudes. I don't really do that for whatever reason.
They aren't all your dudes.
I honestly,
Them's my guys.
honestly,
Lex gets no dudes.
I'm the
Aw.
one. Tell it to my boyfriend. So
You're a dragon girl. Come on.
that's true. I do love dragons.
You are a dragon girly.
I am a dragon girl. But
We're all
like,
dragon girlies here, I think.
generally, when we talk about
True.
fantasy, I'm the weirdo who's like, I want to talk about humans.
Same,
I'm that
honestly, in a
one.
lot of cases. It's like humans and angels for me.
Like I don't
I
want to
like
see. I don't want to see
Exploring
like
how humans interact with other.
right. I don't want to see like orcs and elves and dwarves. I want to see humans plus something.
Mhm.
That's
Which
what
is
I
the
mean,
setting.
Yeah.
plus plants.
My thing, I'm kind of like that, but with a slight twist. So, all right, we've got like, let's say we've got like humans, orcs, elves. What
Mhm.
I want to see is a story that is told from the dwarf perspective, with dwarf norms and culture and history in place of
Mhm.
them interacting with humans.
Mm.
Right? I want to see like, what does a dwarf think about us?
About the
Like,
people.
if a dwarf wrote D&D, what would our
Mhm.
stat bonuses be?
Ooh.
You know, like
Ben, I would like to introduce you to a genre of fiction called has two names. Humans or space orcs, and humans fuck yeah.
okay.
Which is it's speculative fiction, usually in like short, like one shot things, where it's just let's look at humans and the weird things we do and go, what if we're the best at that in the galaxy, or what about us is weird?
Oh, yeah. Oh, Bree is showing me something.
There's a book called Not Your Mountain by my friend AJ Alexander. It's about a dwarf going on an adventure leaving his mountains.
Let's go.
Fucking send me that.
Let's
Send
go.
it to me. I'm not a reader. Send it to
It's
me.
so good. Also,
I'm
the
in.
sequel, Not Your Bargain. I'm just
I'm in.
Not
Mhm.
Your
I'm in.
Bargain is an emotional field trip
Is
that
there
will
a-
make you cry.
Is there an audio version, and would he like one?
I don't know, and I don't think there's currently an audio version, but I could ask.
You can hear it
Anyway,
here on Game Mode.
anyway,
Is there
like,
anyone on
that's-
Game Woven who wouldn't like to record an audiobook at some point?
Yeah, exactly.
I
Fair.
yeah, okay. We're all in accord.
Yeah.
Well, we're all gonna do voices for Not Your Mountain then.
Sure.
You heard it here first.
All right, full cast
From-
recording.
Beautiful.
I
It's going to
First-
be the Wizard Twink.
Oh,
It is me, the wizard.
I'm sorry, but my first thought was sad.
No, it's not sad. It is that.
This might be why. This might be why Lex is the pick, because that is except like deep voice lizard twink is very fun.
Hello, it is me, the wizard twink.
uh,
Alakazam.
Anyway,
for me,
Rob.
I like robots just in general, but I really like them. Like obviously sci-fi robots, cool, like
Mhm.
Data and all that stuff.
Yeah, they got
But, like,
lasers.
they're even cooler to me in like more fantastical settings because they're like even less like synchronous with the setting in a lot of ways. Like especially with like more traditional like D&D type settings, like the idea of like healing magic and souls and reviving magic. Like
Yep.
what the fuck does that mean if you're an artificial quote unquote, like, or do you just have a soul like a normal person? What does that say about like the body
Yeah.
aspect of living if like a mechanical creature has the same soul as a person?
Yeah.
And
Right.
at what point do you ship of Theseus them with your healing and repairs?
Like it
Mhm.
for me that's a well that I never get tired of like going back to, but I also really like, I think one thing that I might be interested in looking into the future, especially with how much I've now been thinking about like memory, is like different people's like time spans of living and thus like cultural memory and how that can interact. Like the Empire's culture memory should be super good, but it's intentionally really bad and specific. you know?
I am obsessed with. Sorry, I typed in the chat BRB, and then Rob talked about that, and I was like, wait, never mind. I am obsessed with just the differences between like fantasy ancestries and how long they live.
Yeah, same.
Obsessed with it.
Mhm.
Orcs typically live about half as long as humans. Dwarfs live about 5 times as long as humans. Elves live either forever or for like a couple thousand years. And dragons live even more than that. What
What does that mean?
does that look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
like from a human perspective, I don't see how elves live to their quote unquote natural lifespans. Like how do you persevere through that much like time?
Yeah, how do you just not accidentally die? Over the course of 1,000 years, like something's gonna happen.
And like how does like
That's still
despair
possible.
like in grief, like how like if you live 1,000 years, how do you culturally, emotionally, as like a person and a society, not get like bogged down in how much other stuff you're outliving?
Isn't there an anime, Frieren, that
I
is
love
like that?
Frieren.
One, anime, and you're never
I
you never
know.
live that down. And two, yes, Free Ren is an amazing anime and has a
Mhm.
lot of notes I would love to steal for Game Woven. It has a lot of cool things in it.
I
Right.
Um,
but
I'll
doesn't
put
it
it on my
also
list.
speak to that?
Yes,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
the main character is an elf who lives for thousands of years. We, if I remember correctly, we don't, at least where I am in it, we don't know her actual age other than
like yeah,
hundreds
it's-
of years.
yeah.
But there's the whole thing is the start of it is she like the beginning of the show is the starting with the end of the adventure. They
Yeah, the
saved
end
the
of the
world.
D&D campaign.
Cool.
Oh.
It starts with them saving the world and they're like, cool, we saved the world. I can't wait to hang out again in 20 years. See you soon. And for her, she's like, 20 years? That's nothing.
Yeah.
I'll see you then. And for all of her friends who are humans and one dwarf, they're like, that's a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's only 20 years. And so she comes back after they've aged like 10, 20 years and they're old now.
Yeah,
And
we
they-
basically
It sounds fucking heartbreaking. I need to watch this.
Yeah.
the
and the
Oh,
whole
like,
it's
thing is
big
meat
on
of the
Tumblr,
show.
yeah.
Yeah.
The meat of the show is like the point in Fruren's life where most of the party, like all the human members of the party, are like getting to the point of like dying of old
Yeah,
age.
they're either old or dead by
Yeah.
like episode 2.
Yeah, and that's
Wow.
Whoa.
I
I gotta watch
I-
this. Anyway,
the
that's
whole-
not
the
really
whole-
something that we've dug into on Game Woven, but that
Yeah.
is always something in the
Yeah.
back of my mind. Like, how
Yeah.
long do Verdreen really live? Like,
That's-
how
which
long,
that is,
like,
like,
you know,
my-
like
you started poking at that with this arc, which I know
we have actually. Yeah.
specifically you, because none of us had touched on it. It was only you, and I thought it was really neat and interesting. And
I-
that you started pointing out like, so you mentioned having someone who lives a long time on the bridge. We have
Yes.
never talked about lifespans on the show before.
It
And
was a
then you-
Varakwi.
The first
Right.
time you said it, you didn't. The first time you said it, you didn't mention anything, and then you brought up it again later on.
Yeah.
On the,
No, I don't remember the first one. I remember the second one. I was talking about a Varakwi who had been on the bridge since Nairburn because they're I think I said their ancestry is long lived,
Yep.
and that was the Varakwi who drank the water and became basically an archaeologist and had
Mhm.
never been allowed to use her archeology skills until that moment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
a
When
very
even just, like,
specific
talking about-
ability.
Talking about Verdreen lifespans, my intention with Henbit was that like she's 30 years old, and that does not work with the timeline as established. Like
Mhm.
Henbit and Jacaranda have to be like a couple hundred years old each, but we also know how they deal with grief and despair, and it's to go fallow. So like there's a part of my head that's like, okay, so Verdreen are potentially long-lived in the same way that trees are, but
Yes.
trees, part of the reason you can count the rings is because they just like stop every year in the winter. They're just like, all right, well, see you next year, and then they
Mhm.
come back and they can like, because but they do renew themselves.
Mhm.
So like, I don't know, probably the same folks that, because like if it took the old green sage, like the old green sage was sure dead or old when they showed up in Zalo. I don't know. I'd have to pull up Rob's timeline of when those things happened.
Mhm.
But
I'm pretty
you know,
sure the old green sage was centuries old
he'd
by the
have to
time he
be.
died.
Yeah.
He'd kind of have
Yeah.
to be. That was the scale of the ground itself, which means that
Yeah.
Henbit is not that much younger, and Jack is probably similar in age. So we've got at least one long-lived people, but probably they just like
But
half
playing with
live,
that-
they half exist, they're half conscious for long periods of time.
Well, that
I don't
know.
because that is
My
another thing
thought-
tying in with the themes. Sorry,
Go ahead.
tying with the themes of of life and death and like why death is important, and also a thing that comes up in my head at least talking about those long-lived species. That kind of comes with like the idea of stagnation or like hibernation or like what is it?
Inactivity.
Remuneration is like it is like pausing life, and in a way
Mhm.
it is its own tiny little death. Maybe not that phrase.
It's a nicer way to put it, though.
Fear is the
Well, you
little-
go dormant,
Just-
and life only
Yeah.
happens while you're living it. So
Yeah.
you get to
Mhm.
live longer, but you also miss out on life that happens without
Yeah, and
you.
it's a thing that even came up in like a piece of fiction I saw like yesterday. In like, if elves are like they're not adults, so they're 100. It's like, okay, does that mean that their brain is straight up like humans, where it's just
Mhm.
not fully developed until they're 100, and like they go through the stages of childhood, the fucking
For
tenth
like
of the
20
speed.
years, you're two.
Yeah, like like
Oh, nightmare.
yeah, like does starting puberty take 10 years or whatever? Like,
Like-
I do love the idea of a long-lived race where things are literally just slower. Like
Mhm.
they sleep for a full 24 hours because they
Huh.
just sleep slower than we do. Any biological process is just slower.
Why that sensible? Like week on, week off. You know, like
Mhm.
Right,
or-
because
and like
if their sleep cycle is 24 hours, then that would mean that they live up to be about 300. You could claim that with dwarves,
Right.
which it makes sense. They're not following the sun, so it would have to be something like to get to 1,000. If we assume human lifespan is caps out at 100 years,
Mhm.
you would be sleeping for 800 hours, which is what, like
Too many.
2 weeks?
Too fucking many, yeah.
Yeah. So a thought I had, because this is something we've not really investigated with Verdreen, is the relationship between the plant and the person, quote unquote. Right? Like who's to say that like the old green sage or henbit is simply an expression of those vines, or like that collection of plant consciousness expressed through a series of different humanoid people, right?
Mhm.
Or even just if like our vines like pass down like a bloodline and the vines carry memories, or are they always new vines? Are the vines like when you graft them and become like Verdreen, does the environment around the vines impact you, right? Like if you come from a place that has like a really like harsh climate that leads to like a lot more like brittle and like hostile like plant life, does that impact your personality as we understand it, right?
I think we have been nudging at that because we have had Verdreen who have sort of different makeups.
Mhm.
I think the conversation between the old green sage and Henbit, the old green sage calls Henbit, I believe he calls Henbit his little sprout, and I think in some of the other like conversations we've had about the Verdreen, unfortunately not on audio record, but like quietly in the background, I think that they are affected entirely by the natural world that they are cultivated in individually. And they can even be changed by either migration or changes in their own like natural conditions. Like they are so responsive to the natural world around them that they are kind of constantly in flux. And so even if they live for centuries, because their I guess you would say their internal worlds are so chaotic, like they might not, I don't want to say develop as quickly, but they might be responding to changes so often that like they're not like humans where they're like, all right, I'm gonna sit down and build my ass a castle. It's castle time, we're doing it. I'm getting the boys together and we're gonna build a castle. Meanwhile, the Verdreen are like, well, now hold on, we got some erosion and we need to sort of deal with that emotionally for the next 3 to 4 years. Like it's I think they live full lives and they get the same 24 hours as everybody else, but they're also sort of communicating
Plants live
with
on
a
different times.
on like a completely different layer of nature, and they're constantly receptive to that and responding to that as well.
Meanwhile, I'm just wondering, are you born Verdreen, or is that something that you can like choose to become? And what happens if someone is born Verdreen and chooses to not take up vines?
Nightmare option. And then I said something absolutely no one liked.
Ew.
Oh,
Hate that. Not a fan.
No.
Yeah, I think we're a little bit too invested.
I said nightmare option.
Yeah. Also, I want the Verdreen to be a constructed status as opposed to a I don't want any of the shit that we do to really require a blood quantum. Is what I'm coming down on. Like you are.
To be a Verdreen, you have to have these things. They're called medichlorians.
Yeah, no, because like you are from Zalo. You are involved with the curses that are implicit to Zalo because you live there, right? Like
Right.
the whole affecting the weather thing didn't follow the bridge.
Right.
True.
So we've also made the carve out for you can be adopted into a brazen line because the weapons follow what the culture accepts as inherited lineage. So like on a certain level, part of the reason that I don't want us to just have straight up dwarves is that level of speciation is what leads you into dumbasses on Twitter being like, no, orcs are supposed to be a savage race that it's okay to murder in mass.
Yeah.
Because they're biological Nazis.
This is actually a thing I remember from when we started Game Over, but before we even recorded anything, this was something that Ben said that I've been taking to heart from the jump, is that while yes, we like technically there probably are fantasy races like elves, dwarves, or whatever, like in real life, people don't just stay separate like that forever. Like if dwarves live next to elves, there's gonna be mixing together eventually. Like that line would eventually vanish or merge or whatever, the same way it has in real life.
Well, we had 4 concurrent human species living on the planet. We had Homo sapiens, we had Neanderthals, we had 2 other ones from other parts of the world. Yeah, like, and we just like kept fucking each other and became human sapiens.
We can't at this point we can't differentiate that. Differentiate. And then like the nations we have now are also things that used to be multiple tribes or groups or whatever. And the only reason that we still have the lines the same we have now was because we invented writing.
Yeah.
And maps were drawn. And we're like, well, it's too late now. We've already written it down. We can't change it.
This is why I was really happy, and we're going way the fuck back, but hey, it's cross stitch, baby. This is why I was happy that we started in more of like a sort of a Bronze Age timeline,
Mhm.
because that meant that the really early history of the world could stay really murky.
Yes.
Because of the lack of ease of communication, because of the lack of writing. Like, one of the first things we established was the runners, and
Mhm.
they were unique to Zalo. So Zalo were actually the first historians.
Mm.
Yeah,
You know?
like
Someone
One of-
there is effectively like the father of modern communication, or whatever the fuck
I
we
mean,
call them.
Yeah.
But
Someone there was
Mhm.
bitching about ANS here. And
like the
I
thing
had
for
to.
me is like with games like D&D, there are certain spells that like each class is supposed to be able to access that warp a setting. Like sending spell, the ability to magically send information instantly, no matter how restricted it may be. That is world changing. Think about how the internet has like warped our world so dramatically. It literally is in every part of our world life, no matter what. Like that kind of magical ability, and we haven't established it. And I would prefer if we ended up not doing it, because like that, like the messengers to me implies there isn't anything like that, or at least
Right.
it's not something that is practical, because otherwise it would be everywhere.
On the
That's also-
contrary, Rob, you mentioned that we haven't established that. We have in several ways, but, and that's but, comma, but. So,
Mhm.
for example, in the first form, we established that there is magic, and magic can basically accomplish whatever you need it to.
True.
Watch out, though.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Oh
So
man.
there's a risk. Like the I think one of the first hard rules we came up with for magic in the woven world was if you dig too deep, it changes you.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it changes you physically, and it messes you up. And then so the other way is the capricious magic of the gods,
Mhm.
which cannot be controlled by mortals. It just kind of happens, so you can't really depend it on that.
Mhm.
And then the third thing that we established, and we established it in this arc, was Tarsig, which is imbuing magic into items, which could basically creating sort of a magitech society.
Mhm.
We sort of vaguely referred to it as like steampunk, but it's more of like early magitech. And that also has a big watch out, though, because because of the corrupting effect of societies when they start
Yeah.
consolidating power.
Yep.
Mhm.
Right.
Well, plus, draw too deep and it changes you.
Yeah.
Hmm.
See that a couple of ways.
So like the magic imbued into the trinkets has to be something that can be imbued over and over and over and over again by people who are able to do it without like destroying them physically right away.
Hmm.
It has to be gradual, like if you work at a factory.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Right.
Like that, yeah.
So I think there is the potential to have world-changing like magic like sending
Mhm.
happen, but there's so many caveats attached to it. There's so many
Mhm.
risks involved that to put it in place would fracture everything.
You might as well do it the old-fashioned way at that point.
You might as well do it the old-fashioned way because the risks are just really gnarly.
Mhm.
Strong
Yeah, you,
magic
like-
is a tool for the reckless and the desperate.
Yes. And we
Mm.
established through Irene, I'm so many characters. Irene, the teleportation mage. I remember when we did it, we were at like the end of an episode really late at night, so we didn't get to dig into it. Like me and Zad immediately were like, do we want to do teleportation? And then Ben was like, we have to end.
Yeah, like we added, like it didn't work exactly like she thought it would. Like she just thought it would like take her outside. It took her like back to her room. She found a book It was like
Yeah.
figuring
She's the only
out
one who can do it, as
magic.
far as we know.
Right. And that was
Yeah.
one of the things that I was
It's-
thinking about. I was like, okay, do we want to look at the implications of teleportation?
Well,
in
like,
a,
and
in
the
a
Bassberg,
world?
the Bassberg tunnels are teleportation. We just don't know what the fuck's going on with them.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
they're a weird. Those are weird. I
That's
cannot
weird,
imagine that those are not normal tunnels.
Because going to the tunnels, and also a thing that we keep establishing in general, is that magic often tends to be stationary in our setting. Places
Okay.
tend to be magic.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it is often
Yeah.
tied to locations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like my favorite thing that we did with teleportation was like the idea of like, oh, you have a standing invitation here, which means you can just be here
Right.
when you need to be.
Yeah,
Right?
I forgot
like,
I
that's
did
not
that with
like
Lena.
it's teleportation, but it's like because I'm supposed to be here.
Right.
Like that's not
Yeah.
teleportation like a wizard in D&D could really realistically use without like monkeying with like
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's-
wordings and stuff.
We also had established that like Lena was part of like a pretty powerful, well-connected family that worked a lot in deal magic, and I
Right.
Mhm.
I love deal magic is really fun
Oh,
for me.
no,
as
deal
well
magic
as, like
is great.
story
That was really
magic.
cool.
It fucking slaps.
It was
Oh
really
my,
cool.
because this is unrelated, a little bit of a weird tangent. So stop me if you want. But
No.
like in
Never.
like the Monster Hearts, which is one of my favorite Powered by the Apocalypse games, there's a skin called the Fae, which is all about like making deals, and in this like very like charged, dramatic environment, like making people promise things and like follow up or punish them can be like really interesting. And I had like the offhand thought of like, if you go like $10, this will or won't happen. That's a deal, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
I bet you won't ask her out, right? Like that's a binding deal, right? So like deal magic is so interesting to me in that like in a lot of ways we make deals all the time, but a lot
Yeah.
of them are really informal.
Yeah. Deal Magic was a really cool emergent property of Arc 2. But we created a new kind of magic in this arc, which Rob coined,
Mad.
which I am obsessed with.
Are we jumping all?
Oh,
Okay.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
I'm
Gnostikinesis.
just riding the wave, baby. I just really like Gnostomancy. I think that's so
It's so
fucking cool.
Gnostikinesis.
Gnostokinesis, sorry.
Remember,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
thought you were
magic.
talking about the true name magic from Tarsig.
Oh, that was
That
cool
too.
too.
Speaking of Tarsig,
That's where we are.
well, we can move on to. I'm sorry. Did you say street magic? Which I fucking
Yeah.
loved. I fucking loved this game, and Tarsig is currently my favorite place in Game Oven. I love Tarsig. It's so fucked up and gross and dirty.
But it's also
It's a
bright.
sandcastle I really want to kick
Uh-huh.
over and over and over again.
So long
We
as you
did.
pick one side and not the other.
I loved what we got from that, and I don't want to take. I know you're going to tell me, oh, but Lux, you did that, but I don't want to take as much credit as you're going to give me for the first of 10, because the whole true name magic thing gave rise to them, and oh boy, we made.
Yeah, First to 10 is an emergent property of the game mechanics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite kind of character and a lot of times villains is like, let's just take a thing that has been established and what is a person who pushes that to the furthest limit look
Mhm.
like, right? Like true name magic has been established, right? Like we understand it is a known quantity. People know it exists and can use it. So what would somebody who like essentially masters it look like? What would they do? What kind of power would they have, and how would they express that power?
Yeah, because ultimately, one of the bigger critiques people often have of magic in stories is how once you introduce something can be done with magic, why aren't you doing that all the time forever?
Mm.
And so, looking at this villain, the second that Ben said, "I think this character dies," I'm like, okay, how would I fix this with true name magic?
Yeah, now
that's-
I'm wondering, how does true name magic and deal magic work together?
True, right? Like,
I mean, is how
And
much
also,
is
'cause, like, with
introducing
things
yourself?
having multiple names.
How much does introducing yourself by a name how is that an unspoken deal that you are representing your truest self?
right?
Did everyone
Also-
watch season 1 of Jessica Jones?
Yes.
Yes.
There is a
Long
scene
ago.
in season 1 of Jessica Jones that is wonderful. Kilgrave captures Carrie Ann Moss.
Mhm.
And Carrie Ann Moss's character is a lawyer.
Mhm.
And Kilgrave, who can control minds by giving them orders, he doesn't control minds. He tells people what to do and they do it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells her to
Gross
do
form.
something, but because she's a lawyer, she starts arguing with him on the technicalities. And it's my favorite. When I was watching this, I was like, so when we were watching the series, in my head, I was like, oh my God, I really need a scene where Kilgrave meets Carrie Ann Moss, the badass lawyer, tries to tell her to do something, and she catches him on a technicality, and it happened, and I was so happy. It was the greatest moment of my life, other than the wedding and the day I got my dog. And
It's a solid
it.
third place.
yeah. My master's
Mhm.
recital is 4th place under that moment. And and I imagine that true name magic versus contract magic would potentially kind of look like that.
Hmm.
There's
I
also
had a-
the chance that it's sort of like dividing zero, like dividing by zero.
Just explodes.
It's so the thought that I had is because we gave things a lot of true names,
Hmm.
and so something that finance sucks, right? Like all the financial like high finance, the way that corporations move money around to avoid doing things like paying taxes or anything is absolute nonsense. And it winds up in these fun bits, like that one part from the one H-Bomber guy video about the oof sound effect, where it's like
Yeah.
5 distinct companies with roughly the same name tried to sell a thing to each other or bought each other or something, and it's nonsense. So like what happens when you cut a deal in your persona as a particular true name, but the thing is you've got 3 of them, and then the thing that made the true name that you made the deal with under, that thing becomes untrue about you, and that true name ceases to exist. There is an extant bargain, and one of the signatories, it no longer exists. What happens to it? And how at that point does like First to 10 or some motherfucker like that figure out a way to cut a bunch of deals, trade all of those deals using deal magic to a true name that is then jettisoned, or worse, pushed off onto somebody else.
Yeah.
So
Well, what they do is they push it off onto somebody else as AAA true name bargain bundles. But when those true names fail, the true name market collapses and housing prices go up for some
Like,
fucking reason.
I mean, the real trick is First to 10 makes a horrible deal, right? Makes a horrible deal where they lose fully, and they swap names with the person that makes the deal.
Yeah.
That's fucked
Yeah.
up.
Like, for
No,
me,
I honestly think that like Lena versus First of 10 is a
Ooh.
chess match
yeah,
that
that's like
lasts
the light.
for
That's the Death
centuries,
Note.
Yes.
with
Yeah,
both of them
because-
sitting in a room staring at each other.
That's our Death Note. Yeah.
Who's
Like,
to
yeah.
say that any of the Ramses family would ever make a deal with their actual true name? Like, there's
Well,
Mhm.
because like I
They
think
they
I think what it-
understand it.
16 fucking true names each. Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
I think it's very interesting in that like I think that the Ramses family has an understanding of true names without understanding true names, because it's
Mhm.
like that idea of like true names, as established and like conceptually, are nebulous, right? Like a person's name and
Mutable.
who they are is mutable and ever changing, but a contract is not, right? And so
True.
where the interaction is where can the contract be made to accommodate change, and where does that bend then break the contract, right? Like the true magic of contract magic would be making a contract that can incorporate any possible personality or name this person could have. Like that'd be a perfect contract would include every
Also-
possible permutation of that person.
So,
But at
another thing is that if we're going with the idea of putting a deal on a name, then shunting that name somewhere, some down the line in history, someone will happen to stumble upon having the same name.
Oh no!
This reminds me of the like bit of like giving cursed items to toddlers.
Yeah. Well, so I had a thought. So Rob, that's so fucking funny. I had a thought, Rob, where so if First of 10 wanted to trap Lena, First of 10 would have to come up with a contract that encompasses all of Lena's current true names and some of Lena's possible true names. But no skilled contract mage, especially one at that level, would ever fall for a trap like that. So it's like it'd be like watching a skilled boxer go up against a skilled UFC fighter. Like they're both equally good at their specific type of hurting people,
Yeah.
but they're so different that it's going to play out really weirdly.
That's the thing, is it's actually a more apt metaphor, because UFC is supposed to be how you get a Taekwondo master fighting a boxer.
Right.
And what ended up happening is, what they found is, the thing that you do is you knock the person over and you choke them, and then they stop moving. And that's what
So-
UFC is.
I know a little bit about ground fighting, and I'll tell you this. People who are good at mixed martial arts are terrified of trying to do mixed martial arts against boxers. And that is because they know that while they know that they could shoot in and take a boxer to the ground, they also know that there is a window when they are trying to take the boxer down,
Gotcha.
where if they fuck up, that boxer is so good at punching, it just takes one.
Just takes one.
It
Mhm.
just
So this
takes
is actually
one.
a very apt metaphor, with Lena
It
being the
kind of
boxer.
is. It
Right.
is
like,
a little
it
bit.
takes one missed true name for the First of 10 to just, you're done. I got you. You're fucked.
Okay, but what if they become friends though?
Oh God! Oh,
and
the
then they
world
just
will
start
end.
making
can
out.
we have a new villain? Then the Undying Empire is.
Listen, we
meaningless.
already
We
paired
have to
up
win
two
back.
gods who are really bad for
Uh-huh.
each other. I
Yeah.
feel like we need to not.
Welcome to our toxic lovers arc.
Oh god.
Don't.
How do
don't-
First and 10 and Claudius get along at that point? Like, that would be very funny, because
Hey, look, Claudius
They even
is,
have
is-
a name.
if I remember correctly, Claudius is dipping into void magic, right?
he is, and yeah.
And does the void even have a name?
Yes.
No.
I have a whole
End of sentence.
thing. I have a whole thing about
Charles.
like how void magic is affecting Circum,
Mhm.
because like he got stabbed. That's a thing that
Yeah.
happened in that, and it's outside the purview of the cross stitch we're doing, and I need to do some other patchworks with Circum. But like, that would be an interesting. How does void magic? How does that erasure of purpose and meaning, which I guess is how I'm interpreting void magic, is it's just like the thing that's there is simply not there anymore. And like, true names are an expression of meaning. Contracts are an expression of intent, you might say. And void magic is just no.
So we had a conversation after a recording, which we did not record, which was this idea of when you go all in with the Undying Empire and they start converting you over to undead, part of what
Mhm.
they do is they start to strip your identity.
Mhm.
You become more like them and less like you. And that's
Mhm.
kind of how you ascend, is you buy into it deeper and deeper and deeper.
I
And-
was driving the other day and I had the thought of like speaking in the voice of a vampire, being like, you imagine yourself as a vessel, and
Mhm.
the vampiric gift is that we drain that vessel
Yeah.
of the liquid that it contains. And so you become empty, but the shape remains. That's why you still look like a person, even though a lot of the things that made you what you were, and you still have the memory because, you know, the glass is still there. But as you're saying,
So we established dead steel. And dead steel, you get stabbed with it and it turns you undead. So I'm thinking of that as a form of it just drains you, just like the normal process, but it drains you, deleteriously, and you don't get a gentle conversion over to undead. You just
Yeah,
fucking,
my
just fucking die.
interpretation of Dead Steel was always because like it to my recollection, Dead Steel was less of like just kills you and more makes you like susceptible. Like it's not a disease. It's like killing all your antibodies
Mm-hmm.
against like undeath and vampiric control. Right. So
I guess we're doing
And-
this. My thought is that a dead steel blade has a fragment of void either forged into it or at the core. And so the first thing that it does is it removes by creating that wound with the void. It removes your life, it removes your purpose. And the innovation of dead steel is to, like, the thing that makes you susceptible, that causes you to decay and makes you suggestible, is what is forged into the steel of the blade is a new purpose. The sword, the weapon has cut away your old purpose, your old life, and has instead instilled within you the purpose, which is to serve the Undying Emperor. Like, that's why when Karen, the last thing that we hear Karen say is, "I serve the Undying Emperor." And then like he dies. And so
Well,
like that mantra.
Well, in Dead Steel, it doesn't do it all at once, though. It creates a beachhead
Mhm.
Yeah.
by way of the wound, because we have also a character established that survives it,
Mhm.
Yep.
which is Perrin.
you know
Um,
to further the like pot analogy, it's like it like pokes a hole in
Yeah.
the pot, and then but like it pokes a hole in like the top of the pot, so somebody has to like tip it so that the water's actually falling out.
So I think ultimately the answer to a lot of our questions on how magic works is also answered by the themes of this arc a little bit.
Mhm.
In
Thank
that,
you, Lex.
no, but like not just as a segue to get back to what we're doing, but also like a lot of the times, like through all of it, we talked about memory, life, all that stuff, right? So I feel like ultimately the way magic works is kind of like a consensus between caster and castee of like
What's supposed to
who would
happen.
win, like who would win between true name and contract would be, it's not that one automatically trumps the other. If you're trying to convince the other person one trumps the other, and once you guys agree, that's what happens.
Hmm,
Would agree. That makes sense to me.
that's
I don't like.
interesting. Yeah.
Like
There's only
magic
one
is,
spellcasting modifier, and it's all charisma, baby.
like
What with your
ma-
persuasion
like the
stat?
effects of magic is like self-actualized.
I mean, it's very interesting to me that because of like the idea of like one of our big through lines is like gifts that are curses, curses that are gifts, right? Like the god isn't actually cursing or gifting you. They're actually just giving you an ability, and then how you perceive it is determines whether it's a gift or a curse.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I
Like
think
something to that degree.
I think magic self-actualizes with the people it's affecting.
I
Like,
mean-
your belief on how the magic should work changes how it does work.
Yes.
There are usually magical creatures,
Mm-hmm.
but they can't like cast fireball, right? They like breathe fire or can fly or whatever. And like, is that distinction because of like intention or like the like outside the box thinking of like a creature isn't going to be like, I can breathe fire, can I like just instead breathe that fire inwards to make myself warmer? Like maybe that animal is just like, no, I just like breathe fire at stuff that is gonna eat me so that I can eat it, right? like how much of magic is really just your intention shaping the world around you versus anything else?
Because ultimately, like, a lot of our stories are about giving people the power to change things. And with magic, we make that a very literal way. You craft reality through your own efforts and belief. And we make that truly a thing you can do.
Bringing that back to Tarsig, there was one Tarsig thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and that is the Boiler Room Witches.
I love them so much.
They're fun. I like the Boiler Room Witches, but what really sold me on the Boiler Room Witches was when we went down to the bottom of the caldera and the caves underneath, and we created their training cave where they start to learn how to manipulate other materials by beginning on the thing that they can change and then finding adjacent things and then sort of working their way outward from there. I thought that was such a neat idea. I really hope that if someone listens back that it's not my idea, and I'm just pumping myself up. I hope it was somebody else's. But
Nobody knows who's
like
pointing at who because I can't see pointing
I'm-
directions.
You came up with the cavern.
For a lot
Yeah,
of our
the cavern,
ideas, it's
but-
really hard to point out who made something a lot of the time. Because if someone says something,
It's-
someone adds on,
and then
someone
everybody
adds on.
jumps on. Is like,
Yeah.
oh, and what
Yeah.
if, and what if, and what if?
And those are our best things that we've made, is when we all go, now hold on. What if this?
Okay, but what?
Yeet.
Yeah,
Yeet.
yeah. I. There's a very strong possibility that sometime in the next 5 years I will be writing stories involving Boiler Room Witches. They will not be exactly the same as they are in this system. I love the concept. It's so cool.
Yeah, I love the Boiler Room Witches. Because first of all, I love music. And they're very musical, which is so cool. Coven of, what was it? Coven of Song and Steel or something? Was that what we called them in their true name? Something like that.
That sounds like
Emily's
a
checking
series
her
of words
notes.
we would have put together.
Yeah. And I thought,
Emily's
It's very
checking
young adult novel.
By Sarah J. Maas.
I remember at one point establishing that they found ways to like leave messages in the metal to where only
Yes.
people whose like only certain people could do it, and it's like their name was like the song that they create when they interact with the
Mhm.
material.
yeah,
Which
I love
is,
them
it's
so
a
much.
whole new name that how is First of 10 gonna figure out what to do with that?
I'm very interested because we obviously here is where we really here, and then obviously the last in winter is where we really solidified the 4 Leviathans, right? Like the series of massive
Yes.
creatures from, in my mind, pre the gods arriving from the city of the gods, whatever that
Mhm.
allegorically or literally means. Because I personally am very invested, and I'm also the Dawnbreaker, like the idea of pre-god, like what was the moon like before
Mhm.
it became the game woven world, right? Like I think the
Mhm.
game woven world doesn't really exist before the gods come from the city of the gods. Like I think there was something, but it wasn't what the game woven setting is about.
Mhm.
But like the idea of like piecing that together and like I know that like I have some like in the huntered there like we kind of established a bit of like the reverence that people have for the Leviathan and like stuff like that. Like that is something that I'm very interested in continuing to explore. Like I like the idea that like Dawnbreaker is not of the god. It is not of it's purely like it's something that gods don't even understand. Like they showed up and it was there in some form and they were like, what the fuck is this?
Hey, is this
Yeah.
yours? No, I was just here, dude.
You know?
Yeah, there's no way of telling what it'll do, but I think it's almost more interesting if it's not what everyone thinks it is. Like everyone,
Mhm.
like in the story that we told in Oh Captain, My Captain, it was like an implement of perfect violence.
Hmm.
Perfect, yeah.
Or conceptual
I don't-
violence.
I don't
Almost.
think that's what it is. I think that there's there's a connection there, but I don't think it's something quite that simple.
Well, if we think about mythology in comparison to like religion, right? Or in comparison to like once you have your gods landed and established, that's also the establishment of like order and a natural world where before everything is chaos. And so the elements which existed before in prehistory, before the actual story begins, they are too much to control. The only reason that in my mind, the only reason that the great megafauna are dead, the four creatures are dead, is through their own devices, not necessarily through anything that happened or people like, what, are you gonna kill the Leviathan with like a spear?
I mean,
It
Ernest
is
says
it
yes.
is it is a primordial entity. It is beyond even the scope of comprehension of the gods. And so to me, like the Dawnbreaker is this thing which you can't even say what it is, really, because it defies the very concept of language and comprehension and being able to process it. It is anti-nature. It is anti whatever the established, like whatever the natural world is now, it is anti that. It is not that.
You know, like the concept of a world kind of embroiled in like chaos and very like wild and primal and natural. Like, what if the Dawnbreaker was that world's one of that world's gods? Like, what is a god of a primal and natural world? Like what is nature's conceptualization of like the most dangerous thing? And in that way, isn't one of the most dangerous things the like connection between like packmates or parents or family, right? That thing that makes you do something that's not like naturally the best thing to do, like maybe.
Yeah, like I had a thought and immediately vanished mid-sentence. Instantly.
Well, and I have a
gone.
thought too that I need to like store.
Yeah.
I just love the concept of what is a god outside of religion.
Mhm.
Yep. Especially since we all come from such a heavily Judeo-Christian tradition.
I've had
Like-
a quote sitting in my head about what is a god in the game world. And I've been wondering when and where to use it. But like I was reminded of it earlier because someone talked about like we are ripples on the water. The thought that came to mind is like humans are the ripple left from a stone hitting the water. And if the humans are ripples and the stone's a god, who is it who threw the stone? Was what came to my mind. Forever.
Ooh.
Fuck. Okay, we're not beating that. That's a hell of a line to go off on.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing I've been thinking about in terms of game over for a while.